Hi folks, welcome to Scholarbot Tarot. Just call me Mayfield, and thanks a ton for stopping by the study space. Today I'm responding to a fairly new hashtag. It's honestly not all that new. I'm pretty sure it came around like late-ish 2022 from Don Michelle Tarot. The hashtag is called It Takes a Village, and it categorizes your decks as though they are patrons of the village that is your collection. Everyone basically has a role to play. This tag absolutely intrigued me, although I did have some difficulty getting started because I didn't really have much of a description to work from that made sense to me in some of the prompts. So I took some liberties to add some descriptions to each role, and even included a role of my own at the very end. So the prompts and timestamps are in the description below. Let's get started. Okay, so for the guide, I consider it to be like decks that I reach for. So my consistent decks that I've been reaching for are the Landback Tarot by Auntie K. So as far as readings are concerned, oh, these are the backs, by the way. The Landback Tarot is such an excellent deck for like inner child work that still delves into like some more serious subjects and situations. It pulls mature themes, for lack of a better term, down to a simpler and intimate place that's more accessible. I truly believe that when a deck creator opens up to us, it prompts us to be vulnerable in turn, and I really appreciate that. I also like to reach for it because of the way that it feels, and I'll probably end up saying a little bit more on the next deck that I show you, but it is a linen finish, and I think I just really enjoy like this size sometimes, being able to just lay a card down and it takes up like a good chunk of the table. I like that. The other deck that I reach for, is the Tazama African Tarot. Yeah, as I alluded to, here are the backs. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the decks that I reach for are technically also decks that I stim with. I'm currently obsessed with large oracle sizes, just like the Landback Tarot, and definitely like with like rose petal finish type decks. Tazama is clearly not oracle size, but the rose petal finish and how well it fits in my hand is still choice. The art itself is really easy on the eyes, and every time I pull a card, I'm left wondering just who the person is, or what painting like that subject was from. It's a very daydreaming deck for me. And I do honestly think, considering that, all of this is a collage deck, and each and every card centers like on this presumably historical figure with these very old looking paintings and sculptures. Like if anybody ever says to you that, I can't make art with more melanated skin tones, like they're not in whatever historical era they were. Yeah, that's obviously a lie. So yeah, this is a really fun deck for me to use, and I do find myself reaching for it alongside the Landback Tarot. So for the Caregiver, I've assigned it as like it says support deck, which is pretty easy enough. So I just kind of took it as, a self-care deck. And for the first one, I would probably say Tarot of the Unknown. I have the third farewell printing, although I believe it might still be available as like a little mini size, and I do have a copy of that somewhere around here. But at any rate, so when you first open this deck, you're met with just a small, touching, melancholic message. It's the lengths we go for the ones we love. Led through the mist by the milk light of moon, all that was lost is revealed. But where have we come, and where shall we end? I don't know, I remember like looking at this little hug scene like the first time, and just my heart melted. These are the backs. So this deck is based off of Over the Garden Wall, which is an essential watching experience during the fall season, in my opinion. The cartoon came out in 2014 and is about a teenage boy and his younger brother wandering through the woods in search of their way back home. It's such a surreal cartoon, and despite it being a little less than a decade old, when you watch it, even for the first time, it feels so familiar. Chris Smith, the artist of the Tarot of the Unknown, did such a wonderful job in capturing that same familiar feeling that adds this touch of melancholy and tenderness whenever you just need a space to be lost. The other deck that I use for self-care is the Sasuraibito Tarot by Stasia Barrington. Here are the backs. So this deck really knows how to just kind of tug at my heartstrings when I need it to. I read with this deck anytime I want to decompress and untangle any emotions that I'm struggling to put into words. Sometimes I'll flip through the deck in search of a card that matches what I'm feeling, or I'll just kind of leave it up to chance and pull a few cards to connect to my experience. I've received nothing but hits from this deck, and I still don't know who gifted this to me. So for creative work decks, I define these as like decks that help inspire me. And the first one I wanted to share was the Poe Tarot by Trisha Leigh Schufelt. And the Poe Tarot does what it's supposed to do. Here are the backs. It's actually pretty awesome considering that it has like this really nice red gilding, and it just clashes so well with everything else. Meanwhile, the actual art is like just pretty much blank, just pure white and like an illustration. But to me, it's like an oracle deck. I'll pull like one card and mainly pay more attention to the quote that I drew. And it just helps me, it helps motivate me to journal each day, since it's been kind of rough for me to journal on my own. I can't really handwrite as much as I used to, or for as long as I used to anymore. So I'll either journal in like my date book, and I'll just have like maybe no more than 2 sentences worth of stuff that I reflect on, or I'll journal more extensively like on my tablet. But I mean, this deck pretty much just helps me move on that. And one thing that I do actually want to say about this deck that I really appreciate is that in the guidebook for each card, it'll have, no, it's actually for the major arcana. You know, I've been pulling a lot of major arcana, so I didn't notice that it was, oh, wait, no. That's interesting. Okay, so we're uncovering something live here. There are some cards that have insights on them. So it'll essentially be, you know, why this particular quote was assigned to that particular card. And of course it'll still have keywords, but it looks like a good chunk of them have insights on it. That's actually kind of cool. Well, I mean, I'm sad that like I didn't notice that some of them didn't have that, but it's just a little thing that I do just vastly appreciate, because sometimes people will just assign quotes to random cards for seemingly no rhyme or reason. But I mean, this deck sorta does. Okay, so the following 2 creative work decks are primarily used for Dungeons and Dragons. And the first one that I ever used for Dungeons and Dragons was the Darkness of Light Tarot. This is the 4th edition. And I do have, like, I believe his name is Tony. I do have his autograph on there. I don't know why I did that, but because I typically, like, don't really care about that kind of stuff. But there it is. Anyways, so I use this deck to do formal check-in readings for my characters. It was actually an integral tool to build my Divine Soul Sorcerer's personality early on when I was, like, brand spanking new to Dungeons and Dragons. Although Darkness of Light is sort of a random choice for this purpose, yeah? Not exactly. I'm gonna zoom in here. Okay, you see that brushstroke right there? It happens in a lot of these cards where you can see just random strokes of light. So the reason why I'm pointing this out, and unfortunately it is genuinely very silly. Let me zoom you back in, or zoom you back out. So it reminded me of a game series called Assassin's Creed. In earlier games, when your character was plugged into the Animus, you could see your memories glitching, like you're in a simulation or a game. So that's what this reminds me of. It looks like, you know, the world within this deck is glitching a little bit. And yeah, it's dorky, I know, but it just helps me start the immersion process before my next session, because I'm pretty miserable at, like, acting out my character in a way that makes sense for him. So I do what I can, like, with this. I still don't do voices for my character, but, you know, I do what I can to try to get his personality to shine a little bit, and this has been just immensely helpful for that purpose. As I said, despite doing what I can to immerse myself in the game, still can't act or take notes to save my life. That is what the Heavenly Bloom Tarot is for. So my Heavenly Bloom Tarot pretty much takes point in game. It largely depends on my mood, but for the most part, its intended use was to help me guide my character, like during a session. Once I got the hang of it, kind of, I started using it as a bookmark. So each card is essentially a checkpoint once we change scenes. Although there are 2 cards in here that depict my character. The Knight of Wands, is my Divine Soul Sorcerer named Suo. And the Tower is the significator for my monk Kiryu. And if you notice, like, me pause, it's because I've only played my monk once. But it was still a fun experience. I didn't realize how broken fighters are, but at any rate, these 2 cards stay separated from the rest of the deck whenever I play either of them. So for the Counselor, this was probably the more challenging one for me, because I typically don't really have much. I mean, I don't really do readings, like, for family per se, so I'm just going to categorize this as decks for others. And the first one is the Cosmovisions by James R. Eads. So this deck has worked pretty much overtime for a lot of, like, my close friends. This is the closest thing to a workhorse deck that I have. I mean, not only is it, you know, nice to look at and definitely, like, a familiar aesthetic for them, I mean, you've probably heard people say, "Oh my God, it looks like Van Gogh." I mean, that's exactly what my friends said when they saw this deck for the first time. Um, I mean, the panoramic capabilities just make this make it such a fun experience for them. And you have to remember, I typically don't do spectacle in my readings. I don't necessarily ask for details from my querents. So a visual aid that can like stimulate their own imagination is plenty welcome. I also think that the names given to the system's court cards provides like a more fantastical yet relatable archetype for them to see themselves in. So like we have the Weaver here. I don't remember which one that was supposed to be, but I mean it's a lot more relatable than, a Knight of Swords or something, and then we have the Peacemaker here. But it's really great to have this resource available for my friends who can have an easier time in immersing themselves in the experience. The other deck that I suppose, could consider a family deck is the Yochi Yokai by Bubo Plague. Although, I mean, the Yochi Yokai is honestly specifically for me and my husband. While he's not a reader himself, he really loves all of the art. Because he just loves like Japanese culture. He himself is like a quarter Japanese, and I'm currently looking for his favorite card. Here we go. So his favorite card is the World. He actually really wanted a print of it, but it sold out by the time I got my hands on it. So we actually went ahead and purchased the Star, and that print is now framed in our living room. So the Mystic was also a little bit of a challenge for me to figure out what I was going to do with this one, because I mean it's spiritual work. I guess I typically don't do spiritual work, so I've categorized this as decks that make me feel an otherworldly connection, or as much as atheistic trash like me feels the divine. And my pick for this one was the Black Gold Lenormand by T and Ian. This is my favorite deck, my favorite Lenormand. It essentially shows me ghosts of the past. Although I don't exactly mean literally. So sociological haunting is like an actual academic concept. It's specifically an alternative method of locating signifiers of what's missing and what can be examined. So in my experience with the Black Gold Lenormand, I'm unable to tear the subject away from the context that they're occupying. In these images, I mean, we see normal people, but because like they're African American in a specific time period and location, particularly in the Jim Crow South, I mean, I simultaneously see them in the context of the Jim Crow South and in their day-to-day lives. So the sacred and the mundane kind of merge and allow me to cross the boundary when I need to. For Sage Advice deck, I figured that could be like decks that offer, I mean, positive advice. Although I tend to do readings for perspective, not necessarily advice. I guess there are still a couple of contenders that I was able to find. And the first one is the Ritual Abuse Tarot by Ryan Sheffield. Here are the backs. So would you believe me if I told you this deck, I mean, gives me the kindest messages? It's one of my oldest decks, and despite its like nightmarish art, it would always make me feel better after a reading. I don't really know how to explain it. I used it so often that the edges started to wear out, and I decided to edge it in a black marker. And if you're wondering, like, where have I seen this art? I mean, you're not going crazy. You're right. This is kind of from something. Ryan Sheffield essentially made this deck. It was basically inspired from the artist who illustrated scary stories to tell in the dark. And this definitely doesn't disappoint. This is like one of my favorite fools. Okay. The next one is the Numinous Tarot by Cedar McLeod. This is the third printing, so it should still be available. And no gilding, which is perfectly fine by me. It makes the deck feel a hell of a lot better, in my opinion. At any rate, the Numinous Tarot gives me, I mean, it gives a picture to work with. Obviously not unlike other decks, of course, but this one is a little bit special for me. It's something more or less accessible, where I can envision myself like in the scenario that it shows. When I have an image that I can jump into, it doesn't sound far-fetched that I'd be a part of this world, therefore making it so much easier for me to extract advice from the scenarios that I'm occupying. I mean, now that we look at this card, does that make sense? So the teacher is basically my entire book report list, but just to make things a little bit more interesting, I did really consider, like, what could be my study deck. Sorry, I'm making a whole bunch of noise over here. And the first one I would probably say is the Beautiful Creatures Tarot, which is the very first deck I used to learn the RWS. So I would read the guidebook, then I would read its match on a more general, like, tarot study book, looking for comparisons, and finally I would write just a short journal entry on it. And that was actually very, very useful for me, because I just didn't recognize that they were the same thing. So making those comparisons and then noting that, oh, this is basically the same system, that was super helpful in being able to learn in my own way the RWS at first. I will also say, however, that this deck was probably not so beginner friendly. We just passed one of the cards. It was like Bowl of Earth or something like that. And basically the court card system in this deck is it's zodiac based. So here we have like the Fish of Waters. I still don't remember which court card that is. And then the Archer of Fires. So I mean, it's not the most beginner friendly deck, but it was still a lot of fun to be able to kind of embark in this journey. So at what point did I realize that they were both basically the exact same system? The Devil. Or this card is the Addiction. No, I won't be taking any further questions. The Philosophy cards. I love existentialist philosophy so hard. Here are the backs. So I have this in two piles for a reason, because in my honest opinion, I think that the minor arcana does ring a little bit hollow with the major arcana, so I just use them separately. Will is Wands, Action, I believe, is Pentacles. We also have Emotion is Cups, and Reason is Swords. Pretty sure I got that right. The art is very, very nice, but it's not really of substance, which is why I do use the major arcana and minor arcana separately. And I think this is still in order because I was doing something with them. In this way, the way that I do it, it just makes for better study of existentialism, since the concept acts as like a philosophical context and the minor arcana acts as vantage points. You'll see, like, you know, Emperor, the Apollonian, you have Sisyphus. So each minor arcana is represented by a character or an existentialist concept from, like, a philosopher. So all of these have basis in, like, a philosophical text. And perhaps you've already noticed, I mean, if you've watched my deck mods and deck mod fails video, I did do as I said I would, and I re-edged my copy. Let me put them together. I re-edged it with an oil-based marker because I was desperate, and it turned out shockingly well. I did also want to share an honorable mention, because this is something that this script was made a really long time ago. And so a couple of changes have been made, but I did want to give a shout out to the Philosopher's Tarot as well by Sarepty. It's basically like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but with not only philosophical concepts, but also philosophers. And it's honestly pretty rad. So if you ever want, like, just a whole educational journey, like, this is actually pretty good. It's not very easy to understand sometimes, but it's still, like, pretty fascinating to just have. So for my outsider, decked up that doesn't belong, that was pretty straightforward, which I was very grateful for. I'm gonna give that to the Azathoth Tarot by Nemo's Locker. I'm pretty sure, I don't have like a certificate of authenticity, but based off of the backs, based off of just the backs alone, I'm like mildly certain this is the 6th edition. So I wrote it up in the little box. So I chose this deck because I feel like the Azathoth Tarot wants to be something it's sort of not. Or at least I don't think it wants to. It's supposedly like a Thoth-based tarot, but it uses RWS imagery, which I guess makes it decently accessible, but no. It doesn't belong because I've never read anything from Lovecraft on purpose. It doesn't belong so hard that it was the first deck that I edged in marker as a practice deck before I edged my Ritual Abuse Tarot. So yeah, the Azathoth Tarot, I don't know what it's doing here, but I'm gonna make use of it somehow. Might just do, I think this was on my book report list, so I might continue doing that if I want to read some Lovecraft, I guess. Now for my stranger, new deck in the village, I actually have, the Earthly Souls and Spirits Moon Oracle by Terry Foss. Why did I buy this deck? There are a couple different reasons why. So I have technically had my eye on this deck ever since it was an indie deck on Etsy, and I don't know why I never jumped on it. I think it's just because it was maybe too witchy for me, so I probably just felt like a total poser wanting to buy it and just have it. Now that it's in mass market, I'm very pleased because my understanding is this is a pretty, like, sought after Oracle deck. I bought this at a metaphysical shop not that long ago. It had to have been maybe a month ago as of this recording. And so yeah, I went to my metaphysical shop that's like around the corner from my job. And I usually like to like buy something there just to like support my local businesses, and this was kind of the only thing that I would have been interested in purchasing. The only thing that I'm not too much of a fan of is the keywords at the bottom. Sometimes the keywords just don't totally mesh with what I'm seeing in the art. Like, can I draw compassion from this card? Kind of. But that's not particularly what I would have thought when seeing that. Same thing with this one, Gratitude. Like, the art is totally, like, super pretty. It's just the keyword that I'm just not into. So it'll be interesting just kind of see what I decide to do with this deck. I have done a couple of readings with it, and it's, like, not bad. I also really like, in the guidebook, it does, like, tell you about, like, moon phase rituals, which I thought was really, really useful. I'm sincerely wondering if I want to chop off the keywords, but even if, like, even if I don't, lose out on the art, it's gonna suck because I think I lose a moon phase from back here. So I haven't been good about watching other VRs, and I feel bad about that. And the only reason why I bother saying anything right now is because I hope that this wasn't done already. But for my bonus addition to my village, I proposed the Village Idiot. The deck that gives you bad info. The one that I just decided to choose, or roast really, the Dragon's Tarot. This deck doesn't know shit. Not historically like it tries to be, and certainly not in a reading. If there's one thing that I learned from actually using this deck, it's primarily because, like, the history, quote unquote, that it tries to incorporate in the cards just utterly fails, which in turn just gives you very confusing messages. Also, it's, like, old Los Scarabeo, so their guidebooks were, like, not really all that coherent, to be honest. But at any rate, I mean, it's just so incredibly important to have responsibly made decks because, like, the more you know about history, I feel like the more enriching your reading experience will be. The downside is it could really just break your immersion if you know something is just severely misinformed. I mentioned this is a Dragon's Tarot. And there you have it. My village in all its glory. Much more functional than I would have given it credit for. Personifying paper is fun. At any rate, I mean, either way, I highly recommend giving this tag a shot. I think it's a great exercise in seeing the ecosystem of your collection, but I don't know, what do you think? For me, it might be time for a culling. Any hoosers, all links and further reading are listed below in the doobly-doo. Please don't forget to leave a like if you like the video, subscribe if you like me, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye!